President-elect Donald Trump named Linda McMahon as his choice to lead the Department of Education. She's a former WWE executive who led the Small Business Administration during Mr. Trump's first term. If confirmed, she'll oversee a department the president-elect has vowed to dismantle, leaving education decisions up to individual states.
Brett Pike, the founder of Classical Learner Homeschool Company. If you want to get interested in this, or if you want to get involved in anything that Brett's doing, by the way, check out classicallearner.com/POSO. Brett, how are you, man?
Good. How's it going, Jack? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's going really well. So tell folks who aren't familiar with your program. I know that we've been promoting it here on the show for a couple of weeks now, but, just for folks who haven't heard anything about it coming in, we have the Trump administration getting involved. We're putting it together. You've got this incredible Secretary of Education coming in with Linda McMahon and so many others. It really is a time where people are looking at new forms of education, because I think we realize that the current form is just totally broken.
Yeah, it's not just broken, it's so broken that everyone's excited that there's talk of getting rid of the Department of Education. And if you look at academic performance in America, pre-1980 and after 1980, the inception of the Department of Education, it has actually gone down. And someone like Linda McMahon is in a prime position to do the things that everyone knows needs to be done. We all see that the CRT, the critical race theory, where they're basically training young people to view the world through the lens of oppressed versus oppressor, right? They're basically training young Marxists. We have to get that out of our education system. And you have the sexual education, which I think we all know, it's to anyone who is even a little bit honest knows it's completely inappropriate. And these teachers have no business talking to our children about anything sexual, let alone the type of degeneracy they're pushing on our kids. But what I would like to say to you and your audience and America in general, that getting rid of the Department of Education, rolling back CRT, getting rid of the sexual education, that's only touches the surface of the things that have to be done. In 2023, and I don't know how this went under the radar, Gavin Newsom signed a bill, Assembly Bill 873 in California, which mandated that media literacy, as they call it, be taught to not only high school students, but all the way down through kindergarten. They're trying to get our kids from as young an age as possible. And when they say media literacy, what they really mean is to teach our kids to outsource their thinking to authority. So what does that look like? What is media literacy according to Gavin Newsom? Well, what they mean is to teach children to look to reputable sources. So if you read something in the New York Times, that's a reputable source. Well, of course, that must be true. If you read something in the New York Times and the Washington Post, well, now you have cross references from reputable sources. Well, of course, that's true. And of course, the only thing they're really doing is training our children to outsource their thinking to authority. Now, with my homeschool program, Classical Learner, I run a homeschool company, we also teach media literacy, and it looks completely different. I write 2 fake newspapers. The students read through the newspapers and they scan it for logical fallacies. Are there appeals to authority? Are there appeals to emotion? Are there straw man arguments? They fill out a finding fallacy sheet, and then they evaluate each claim made by the newspapers. And with each claim, they have to evaluate, did it come from a primary source, a secondary source? Then they have to get back to the source, evaluate the source for themselves. I mean, this is what critical thinking really is. This is what media literacy should be. Can you find logical fallacies? Can you get back to primary documents? Do you know how to source information? And then after our students source that information, I have them fill out discernment charts. So it's basically allowing the students to view how information should be filtered through their brains. So you have I know and how I think I know and why I think that, I heard and where I can look. And this is really the dichotomy we're seeing with people who are still sending their children to the public school system, in which there is a concerted effort, not just in California, but they passed a similar bill in New York and I think 14 other states, where they are trying to train our children from as young an age as possible to outsource their thinking to authority, so that the children could be turned into cogs in the machine for pushing the agenda that those in power want to push. But smart parents are fighting back. They're teaching their own version of media literacy, which is about logical fallacies, getting back to primary documents, evaluating sources, and actually filtering information and learning to discern truth from fiction. And to me, I think this is probably as important an issue in America as anything else, because if we allow the powers that be to hijack the minds of our children, and they're trying to, then we can wake as many people up as we want today, but the next generation will be asleep. And that's what we can't allow to happen.
Well, that's what it's about, right? Because ultimately, what you're talking about is training free thinkers, training people to say, and it's just in the very first instance to say, oh, just because something is written in the Associated Press, that doesn't mean it's necessarily true. Or just because it's written in NBC or CNN or ABC and CBS and all of these various things, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Now, what I think is interesting is it also doesn't necessarily mean those things are false.